The great insight of Rabbi Menachem Froman is that if in the conflicts in the Middle East, religion is part of the problem, it will have to be part of the solution. We cannot exaggerate the significance to heal the relations between Judaism and Islam. So you're listening to the Interfaith Podcast, and together with me is my dear friend, Sheikh Ghassan Manasra.
Shalom, Rabbi Jacob Nagen, and shalom for all of the audience.
We will discuss the 5 pillars of Islam.
I'll try to explain about them from Muslim perspective, and Rabbi Nagen will try to explain from Jewish perspective.
And together we will see that despite our religions being different, our God is one.
Enjoy.
Today we'll discuss together the second of the 5 pillars of Islam, the pillar of prayer, which again, as we said, the Shahada was similar to the Aramaic of Sahadi. Here too, the word for prayer, Salah, is also similar to the Aramaic word Saluta. So please share with us about prayer in Islam and its significance.
Shalom, Rabbi Nagen. That prayer is the most important covenant between the human being and God. But we know that other things that, other pillars, especially the bear witness, the Shahada, and the Salah, you must say it, and you must pray, you must give charity, you must go to Hajj. But if you don't have money, you don't need to give charity. If you are sick, you cannot fast. If you don't have money and sick, you cannot go to the Hajj except the prayer. The prayer you need to pray. This is the most important covenant, and part of the Muslim scholars in the Middle Ages and later, they say that if you will not pray, you are not Muslim. You got out of Islam. Then you must do and you must pray to keep the connection between you and between God as covenant.
Just me add, I also feel there's something very powerful about prayer. We do many actions, good actions, I hope, with our hands, but we try to say good things to each other and to the world. But I deeply feel prayer really captures something of our innermost essence, of our soul, I would say, that could really express something which is much deeper than thoughts, words, or actions. And I feel there's a real power of joint prayer.
Yes.
Joint prayer, I think Jews are Jews, Muslims are Muslims. We shouldn't be confused, and each to the direction we pray in with the words that we have. But somehow I feel when we talk to one another, it's one level of connection. But when people are praying and the words of their own, the direction of their own, but somehow coming from your soul and connecting up to the one God, this allows a type of connection which I feel surpasses almost everything else. And maybe I'll even mention that there was a documentary done by Nir Baram about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Overall, it was quite a pessimistic documentary, but despite him being a secular Israeli Jew, he chose to end the movie with a scene of Jews and Muslims, Jewish settlers from the West Bank, Palestinian Muslims from the West Bank, praying together, because somehow something touched him, even as a secular Jew, and gave him a feeling that perhaps there is a place of hope for a joint future.
Yes, I think so, because I want to say that if you need to pray, you need to prepare yourself for the prayer. Many things you are doing, sometimes you can't do it directly, but the prayer, you need to prepare yourself. I'll speak about the early morning prayer. As I said, it's very important for me to wake up very early, because the Muslims pray 5 prayers a day: the morning, noon, afternoon, evening, and night. The shortest prayer will be the morning, because it's early morning and you are still lazy. Most of the people that, I think God and the Prophet Muhammad, they thought about the believers. They will be a little bit lazy early morning, then they need to wake up and to pray and so on. But I think it's up to you. If you, as we mentioned before, that if you will wake up and you will do your duty in love, you will not feel yourself as a lazy person. You will feel yourself so active and so aware, so awake, then you need to do the act in love. Connect with your prayer in love, and believe me, the prayer will respond to you in love and will hug you and you'll pray. Early morning, I'm waking before the prayer because the prayer here, it's at 5 o'clock. Early morning, less and more, maybe some minutes, but I'm waking early morning and I'm preparing myself. What to prepare yourself? First of all, when you wake up in Islam, you need to say, Baruch atah Adonai she'achzarta bi nishmati. Oto davar. It's the same. Thank God that you give me back my spirit and soul. And then, you need to smile. Usually I wake and I chant, We pray, my wife and I together. She chant, I chant. And we look at the eyes one of another, because I look at her eyes to see myself, and she looking at my eyes to see herself. The meaning is, sometimes it's dark a little bit, you cannot see, but it's very important to look at the eyes to realize who you are. You are the believer, that you are connecting to God through one another. She will be my bridge toward God, and I'll be her bridge toward God. And then, let everything all around you to dance with you, to taste that beautiful connection, hidden connection between us. And then we make ablution. We wash our, parts, hands, face, and so on, clean everything, because you need to awake your external side, your external image, and to come to begin to pray. The intention, you need to set up your intention every morning when you will wake up, and then you will come to pray. And I want to tell you something. We have lots of desires in our life. It's not so bad. If you rule and you can control your desires, it will be great, The most important desire is to meet the prayer, because the prayer is the place you will meet your God there. Why? You will pray. You will take the words of the Quran, the first chapter of the Quran. It's the Fatiha, the opening, and with some verses from other chapters, you will read there. Then you will talk to your God. You will be in connection with your God. And Layla and I will pray together as a minyan, And then when we'll finish, believe me, I can continue my day a very active person.
Some points of contact that touch me. First of all, to know that we're kindred spirits. Together with my wife, we also used to have groups to lead about couplehood prayer, about how couples to pray together. But beyond that, in terms of before approaching God, we must approach each other. One of the greatest Kabbalists of all time, the Ari Kadosh, he writes that before praying every day, we must first say, I accept upon myself the commandment of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, to love the other as myself, to realize that the path to the divine begins with our connections to one another. Also, what you mentioned about the washing before prayer, within Judaism, certainly within the Hasidic tradition, there is a great place of trying to go to a mikveh for it. Sometimes I think of mikveh as something for women after their period, but in Hasidic, there is a custom to go to the mikveh, which is experience of very often of feeling reborn and cleansed for another part of the preparation to stand in front of the divine. And I think many in Israeli society, their primary encounter with Islamic prayer is with the Muezzin, the call to prayer. If you could please tell us about the origin and meaning of this call to prayer.
Yes. In the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he got the duty of prayer, and there is a very good story, I hope you will say a little bit about this, about the meeting between Moses and Muhammad in divine. But, when he got the duty of prayer, he said, okay, how can I call the people to come? Maybe we can use the rings, they will build the rings, or we can take the shofar and we can litkoa b'shofar, or what else? But he say, I need something for me, for my nation, for my believers. And one of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, he was sleeping, and in his dream he saw the calling of the prayer. Adhan, we say in Arabic. The calling of the prayer. Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I bear witness there is no God the greater, God the greater. I bear witness there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Come to pray, come to the good work. God is greater, God is greater. There's no God but God. And he came to the Prophet Muhammad. He say, oh Prophet, I had a dream how to call the people to the prayer. He says, say it. He say, it's revealed to me the same as you said. And they began to do that. Now, before the prayer, on the time of the prayer, the Muezzin, or the person he's calling for the prayer, he got up in a very high place. We say in the minaret today, and he called the Muslims for the prayer. Part of them, they wake up. Part of them, they hear and come to the mosque, and so on. And the Prophet Muhammad say about the people they calling for the prayers, that their neck will be, they will come in the end of the days with a very long neck. The people will see them and they will say, oh, they were great callers.
I'd like to share with you a fascinating point in Jewish law, halakha, relating to the Muezzin. Within Judaism, there's a law that women after their menstrual period go to a mikvah, a ritual bath. Now, there's a debate whether is it time to go to the mikvah, is it after sundown, or is it after what's called in Judaism, Seit HaKochavim, the time that the stars come out. One of the greatest rabbis of our time, Rabbi Avadia Yosef, brings a proof that it is sundown, because he brings sources that say that the women of Jerusalem, they didn't have watches back long ago, so they would wait to hear the Muezzin. When they hear the call to prayer the Muezzin, they will know that the time is now to go to the mikvah, which he brings as a proof that clearly it is sundown, because we all know that the Muezzin is sundown. I would like to also share another story about sensitivity. Two more stories about sensitivity to the Muezzin. The first is a very dear friend of mine, Rabbi Yehuda Glick, who was a member of the Knesset, the parliament, and because of his promotion of Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount, was seen by Muslims, tragically terrorists, as an enemy, and he barely survived an assassination attempt. But when he came to the Knesset, he began the Knesset's first Jewish-Muslim caucus. And when in Israel, there was legislation proposed to limit the Muezzin because the noise level at different hours of the night were troublesome for people trying to sleep. He had a meeting in the Knesset saying that I understand this issue, but it should not come from legislation. It should come from discussion of the different sides here, because if it's done by legislation, it could be seen as something external, something anti-religious, and we need great sensitivity. I was at the meeting at the Knesset, and one of the leaders of the Muslim Waqf, charge of holy places, he was deeply moved by Rabbi Glick's words and said, I have to say something. So Yehuda says, so say it. He says, I change everything I think about you. And Yehuda, with his sense of humor, says, oh no, they're going to take away my bodyguards now. But anyway, it's a sign, part of the tragedy, that we don't know each other. People think of who is the other, and somehow could lead to such deep misunderstandings and lead to such tragedy of so much of the hatred and violence which is part of our region. And maybe one last story. My wife wants to pray in Hebron at the Cave of the Patriarchs, which according to our traditions, the patriarchs and matriarchs are buried. She's there, and it was a Friday afternoon, and for some reason, on the Jewish side, she found herself alone. She said, well, this is a unique opportunity to pray alone with my holy mothers and fathers. But from the side that the Muslims prayed of the patriarchs, suddenly the Muezzin goes off, and it's very, very loud. So first, my wife was frustrated. They're interfering with my prayer. But she says, wait a second. Ultimately, each with our own words, each with our own path, we are going to the one God. So why fight it? So she decided that she will continue her prayer, and you feel that this is some sort of background harmony to her prayer. And when she did that, she realized that it's not noise, it's beautiful music. So when you're against it, it sounds like noise. But when you connect, again, in her way, she was not saying the same words. She was saying Jewish prayer. She realized it was a beautiful voice. This happened on Friday. She said, I wonder, is it a recording or is it a real person? That Sunday, I was at a meeting of rabbis and sheikhs in Hebron, and I asked one of the sheikhs, I said, is it a recording or is it a real person? And the sheikh said, of course it's a real person. It's my cousin, and I will send regards. There's something very moving to me about the origin of the pillar of prayer in Islam. Because according to Muslim tradition, I understand that the pillar of prayer was given during the journey of Muhammad to Al-Aqsa, which they identify with the Temple Mount, where once stood the Jewish temple. This is moving because King Solomon, who built the temple, in his prayer to God, he says, from this place, the Temple Mount, God listened also to the prayers of the Nakhri, of the non-Jew who comes from far away. And this universal message, which is also echoed in the book of Isaiah, saying the future temple should be a house of prayer for all nations. I was once studying this with a friend of mine, another Muslim sheikh, and he says, realize the words Al-Aqsa means the faraway prayer house. So if Solomon is saying, listen to the prayers of the non-Jew from far away, and Muhammad is said, go to the Mizgad, the mosque, which is far away, there's a connection, a common thing. Yes, the Jewish people pray, the non-Jewish world prays, but our hope is that our prayers, we acknowledge that prayers are going to the one God and take joy in the prayers of one another. But also, since we try to talk not only about the similarities, but also the differences between Judaism and Islam, perhaps let us end with a passage in the Hadith, which are oral traditions about Muhammad, that a legend that tells about the meeting of Muhammad and Moshe when Muhammad received the pillar of prayer. The way the Hadith tells it is Muhammad goes up from the Temple Mount, goes up, meets God, and is told to pray 50 times a day. Muhammad goes down, he's met by Moses. Moses says, 50 times a day? That's too much. People can't pray 50 times a day. Go back to God and tell him it's too much. So Muhammad goes back. God says 40, comes back down. Moshe says too much. And going back and forth like the biblical story of Abraham, negotiating, arguing with God about Sodom. And ultimately, when Muhammad comes down and says that, okay, we're down to 5, Moses says, that's still too much. But Muhammad said, no, this is, I'm not going up again. And this really captures in a nutshell part of the differences between the Jewish and the Islamic discourse. In Islam means submission, and therefore it's more about submitting to God. Judaism, of course, also believes in submitting to God, but there is an aspect about being partners with God and dialoguing with God. And therefore we have Moses, who's greatly respected in Islam, but as the prophet of the Jewish people, having the issue about discussing with God, debating with God. And I think these are two very important values, but we need a balance about in what ways do I submit? In what ways am I willing to ask questions? And therefore, I think a world that have different stresses and different religions could create a balance could bless all of us. Thank you, Sheikh Ghassan.
Thank you, Rabbi Nagen.
You've been listening to the Interfaith Podcast from the Blickley Center for Interfaith Dialogue. You could find us in all the podcast applications. You're more than welcome to recommend us to your friends. And if you have insights or comments, you could find details how to make contact with us in the description of the chapter. And our producer is Elad Sadot. Thank you, Elad.
And thank you were with us. U'B'ezrat Hashem, we'll meet in the next chapter.
Inshallah.